Hello, and welcome to Creative Writing. I am Armin Rose, and I will be your guide as we go through the contents of this course. This is a continuation of the elements of literature. This is Part 7, the plot. The plot is a literary term used to describe the events that make up a story, or the main part of a story. These events relate to each other in a pattern or in a sequence. The structure of a story depends on the organization of events in the plot. Plot is known as the foundation of the story, which the characters and settings are built around. It is meant to organize information and events in a logical manner. Plot has several elements. The first element of the plot is the exposition or the introduction. This is known as the beginning of the story, where characters and setting are established. The conflict or main problem is introduced as well. The second element of a plot is known as the rising action, which occurs when a series of events build up to the conflict. The main characters are established by the time the rising action of a plot occurs, and at the same time, events begin to get complicated. It is during this part of a story that excitement, tension, or crisis is encountered. The third element of a plot is known as the climax, or the main point of the plot. It is the turning point of the story and is meant to be the moment of highest interest and emotion. The reader wonders what is going to happen next. The fourth element of the plot is known as falling action, or the winding up of the story. Events and complications begin to resolve, and the result of actions of the main characters are put forward. The last element of a plot is the resolution or the conclusion. It is the end of a story and ends with either a happy or a tragic ending. This is a diagram of a basic plot line. It represents the feelings that a reader experiences as he goes through a story. At the opening or exposition, the line is still flat because the reader is only learning about the characters and the setting. When we introduce the conflict, it becomes an inciting moment, leading to the rising action. The rising action peaks at the climax, the most important part of the story. After the climax is the falling action and leading to the resolution. The resolution will be another flat line because the reader has already calmed down from the emotions of the story, but it should not go lower than the opening because the reader has already given and invested his time and emotions with the characters. The plot has several functions, and here are some of them. The plot focuses attention on the important characters and their roles in the story. It motivates the characters to affect the story and connects the events in an orderly manner. It creates a desire for the reader to go on reading by absorbing them in the middle of the story, wanting to know what happens next. The plot leads to the climax, but by gradually releases the story in order to maintain the reader's interest. During the plot of a book, a reader gets emotional and connects with the book, not allowing himself to put the book down. Eventually, the plot reveals the entire story and gives the reader a sense of completion that he has finished the story and reached a conclusion. The plot is what forms a memory in the reader's mind, allowing them to think about the book and even making them want to read it again. By identifying and understanding the plot, the reader is able to understand the message being conveyed by the author and the explicit or implicit moral of the story. Now let us discuss conflict. First, let us define conflict. In works of narrative, conflict is the challenge main characters need to solve to achieve their goals. Conflict is a major literary element that creates challenges in a story by adding uncertainty to if the goal would be achieved. A narrative is not limited to a single conflict. While conflicts may not always resolve in narrative, the resolution of a conflict creates closure or fulfillment, which may or may not occur at a story's end. The nature of conflict. Conflict in literature refers to the different drives of the characters or forces involved. Conflict may be internal or external. That is, it may occur within a character's mind or between a character and exterior forces or points of view. Conflict is most visible between two or more characters, usually protagonist and antagonist, but can occur in many different forms. The purpose of conflict. The literary purpose of conflict is to create tension in the story, making readers more interested by leaving them uncertain which of the characters or forces will prevail. Closed and open-ended conflicts. There may be multiple points of conflict in a single story, as characters may have more than one desire or may struggle against more than one oppressing force. When a conflict is resolved and the reader discovers which force or character succeeds, it creates a sense of closure. Conflicts may resolve at any point in a story, particularly where more than one conflict exists, but stories do not always resolve every conflict. If a story ends without resolving the main or major conflict, it is said to have an open ending. Open endings, which can serve to ask the reader to consider the conflict more personally, may not satisfy them. But obvious conflict resolution may also leave readers disappointed in the story. There are several classifications of conflicts. The first is person versus fate, or God. This category explicitly names fate, or God, or the gods, as the antagonists. An example of man versus fate is Final Destination, wherein death is the fate that the characters wish to avoid. Example of man versus the gods is Percy Jackson. A person versus self. These are internal battles that characters wage within themselves. These are internal issues that affect their actions, motivations, and interactions with other characters. The conflict can be a recurring theme throughout the story or at a particular point in time. An example of man versus self is 127 Hours, wherein the main character needs to find the courage within himself to do what he needs to do in order to survive. Another example of man versus self is Bruce Banner and the Hulk. And also the Anakin Skywalker Darth Vader persona. Trainspotting is another movie which features man versus self, as it chronicles the life of a drug addict as he struggles to become clean. The third type of conflict is person versus person, or man versus man. These sort of conflicts are the most common. The characters will be opposed by or will oppose the actions, reactions, motivations of another character or characters. All superhero movies are man versus man. A man versus man story doesn't always need to be good versus evil. The following example, Captain America Civil War, is a story of two opposing groups, both of which are composed of superheroes, because they are fighting about different causes. The fourth type of conflict is person versus society. These are conflicts where your characters firm beliefs are against norms that the entire society as a whole endorses. It could be social evils or discrimination practiced by society that is opposed by a minority. An example of man versus society is Mean Girls, wherein the main character goes against the entire school, led by the most popular girls, called the Plastics. Another example is To Kill a Mockingbird, wherein the main character tries to defend a person of color against the society who wishes to harm him. The fifth type of conflict is person versus nature. In this conflict, the protagonist is pitted against nature, or a representation of it, often in the form of an animal. Example of man versus nature is Castaway, but this can also be a man versus self, as he is also struggling to survive. Jaws is an example of man versus nature, wherein the shark is the representation of nature. The sixth type of conflict is the person versus supernatural. Supernatural elements are typically those that defy the laws of nature and are beyond scientific understanding. Such a setting adds gravitas and drama to the story. Stories that include magic or supernatural being like vampires, werewolves, and zombies go in this category. Examples of man versus supernatural are the Vampire Diaries and Supernatural. Next is person versus technology. Humanity's innate skepticism about the wonders of technology has resulted in many stories in which antagonists use technology to gain power, or in which technology takes over or becomes a malign influence in society. So stories involving robots, supercomputers, or mutants developed by man fall under this category. Example of man versus technology is The Matrix and WALL-E. Now let's go to the plot twist. A plot twist is radical change in the expected direction or outcome of the plot or the narrative. It is a common practice in narration used to keep the interest of an audience, usually surprising them with a revelation. The most common plot twist is the surprise ending. It is a plot twist occurring near or at the conclusion of a story. It is an unexpected conclusion to a work of fiction that causes the audience to re-evaluate the narrative and characters. Before we continue, I would like to issue a spoiler alert. If you have not read the book or watched the movie, we will be revealing plot twists. Anagnorisis, or discovery, is the protagonist's sudden recognition of their own or another character's true identity or nature. Through this technique, previously unforeseen character information is revealed. An example of anagnorisis is the reveal of the character Tom Riddle as Lord Voldemort. Another example is the reveal of Darth Vader as the father of Luke Skywalker. And another one is the reveal of the patient that he can see dead people, making the audience realize that the psychiatrist is already dead. Analepsis, or flashback, is a sudden, vivid reversion to a past event. It is used to surprise the reader with previously unknown information that provides the answer to a mystery, places a character in a different light, or reveals the reason for a previously inexplicable action. The flashback in Harry Potter reveals that Professor Snape has always been guarding Harry because of his love of Harry's mother, Lily. Peripeteia, or reversal of fortune, is a sudden change in the protagonist's life, whether for good or bad, that emerges naturally from the character's circumstances. Peripeteia must be logical within the frame of a story. The reversal of fortune that happens in Devil's Advocate is caused by the lead character making a deal with the devil. When he refuses to give up his soul at the ending, the devil takes back all of his gifts. Another example of reversal of fortune is Wall Street. It talks about the consequences of insider trading. Deus ex machina means God out of the machine. It refers to an unexpected, artificial, or improbable character device or event introduced suddenly in a work of fiction to resolve a situation or entangle a plot. In ancient Greek, the Deus ex machina was the character of a Greek god, literally brought into a stage via a crane, after which a seemingly insoluble problem is brought to a satisfactory resolution by the god's will. In its modern figurative sense, the Deus ex machina brings about an ending to a narrative, though unexpected, generally happy resolution to what appears to be a problem that cannot be overcome. This device is often used to end a bleak story on a more positive note. This is an example of the Deus ex machina in a Greek theater, where a Greek god supposedly comes down from the heavens to solve everyone's problems. An example of Deus ex machina in contemporary movies or stories is The Matrix. And also Toy Story 3, when they're about to go to the furnace and a literal crane grabs them before they can fall down the furnace. Poetic justice is a literary device in which virtue is ultimately rewarded or vice punished in such a way that the reward or punishment has a logical connection to the deed. In modern literature, this device is often used to create an ironic twist of fate in which the villain gets caught up in his or her own trap. Poetic justice can also be referred to as karma. An example of poetic justice is in Aladdin, when Jafar wishes to be the most powerful genie. He forgot that being a genie means living out of a lamp, and so he got trapped in a lamp as the most powerful genie. Chekhov's gun refers to a seemingly minor character or plot element introduced early in the narrative that suddenly acquires great importance to the narrative. A similar mechanism is the plant, a preparatory device that repeats throughout the story. During the resolution, the true significance of the plant is revealed. An example of Chekhov's gun is Sybil Trelawney in Harry Potter. She is the divination professor that many thought was a fake, but it turns out she made the prophecy, which tells how to defeat Lord Voldemort. A red herring is a false clue intended to lead investigators toward an incorrect solution. This device usually appears in detective novels and mystery fiction. A red herring is a type of misdirection, a device intended to distract the protagonist, and by extension the reader, away from the correct answer or from the sight of pertinent clues or action. An example of a red herring is the bishop in Da Vinci Code. He chased the lead characters all over Europe relentlessly, making them think the Catholic Church was behind some sort of conspiracy. An unreliable narrator twists the ending by revealing, almost always at the end of the narrative, that the narrator has manipulated or fabricated the preceding story, thus forcing the reader to question their prior assumptions about the text. Another example of unreliable narration is a character who has been revealed to be insane and thus causes the audience to question the previous narrative. An example of an unreliable narrator is The Fight Club, wherein the narrator and Tyler Durden is revealed to be one and the same person. Another example of an unreliable narrator is in The Usual Suspects, wherein the police discover at the end that the man they're looking for is the same man they have been questioning for hours and they have just released because they believe him to be innocent. Another example of the unreliable narrator is Memento, because the lead character does not have the capacity to retain long-term memories. In medias res means in the middle of things. It is a literary technique in which narrative proceeds from the middle of the story rather than its beginning. Information such as characterization, setting, and motive is revealed through a series of flashbacks. This technique creates a twist when the cause for the inciting incident is not revealed until the climax. In medias res is often used to provide a narrative hook. An example of in medias res is Now You See Me. It begins with the magicians already performing magic acts in order to steal, and the detectives are already chasing after them. As the rest of the story progresses, the motivations of each character are revealed. A nonlinear narrative works by revealing plot and character in non-chronological order. This technique requires the reader to attempt to piece together the timeline in order to fully understand the story. A twist ending can occur as the result of information that is held until the climax, and which places characters or events in a different perspective. An example of nonlinear narrative is Pulp Fiction, wherein the lead character dies before the middle of the story, and in the succeeding scenes, the audience will have to figure out if the event happened before or after his death. Another example of a nonlinear narrative is The Breakup. It starts with them meeting each other, with the following scene being the breakup, and the succeeding scenes are told in jumping patterns of before and after their breakup. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is another nonlinear narrative, jumping forward and back in time in the relationship of the two characters. Reverse chronology works by revealing the plot in reverse order, which is from the final event to the initial event. Unlike chronological storylines, which progresses through causes before reaching a final effect, reverse chronological storylines reveal the final effect before tracing the causes leading up to it. Therefore, the initial cause represents a twist ending. 500 Days of Summer is an example of reverse chronology. It starts with the two characters have already broken up and ends with them meeting each other for the first time. I do not own the pictures seen in this video. Credit for these pictures belong to their owners. The ideas discussed in this video are based on the content standards of the Department of Education. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lesson.